My name is Eleanor, and for the past 5 years, I've been living a lie. The world, especially my family, sees me as a frail old woman slowly fading into impoverished obscurity. They see the peeling paint on my porch, the decade-old car in my driveway, and the worn-out cardigans I wear like a second skin. They hear the tremor in my voice when I talk about the rising cost of utilities and the drafty windows that winter always seems to find. What they don't see is the fire still burning behind my eyes. A fire forged by my late husband, David, who always said, "Character is what you are in the dark." The rain was coming down in sheets that Tuesday, a relentless, drumming assault on the old roof of my suburban Ohio home. Each drop that found its way through the aging shingles and into the bucket I'd placed in the hallway sounded like a tick of a clock, counting down the moments to a confrontation I had been orchestrating for years. The bucket was a new addition, a testament to the latest stage of my deliberate decline. I needed a reason, a plausible one, for what I was about to do. I picked up the phone, my fingers tracing the numbers I knew by heart. My son, Mark. He answered on the third ring, his voice rushed, distracted. "Hi, Mum. Everything okay? I'm in the middle of something." "I'm fine, dear," I said, injecting a note of weary fragility into my tone. "It's just the roof, Mark. It's leaking again, quite badly this time. I think I'll need to get it professionally repaired." A heavy sigh on the other end of the line. I could picture him perfectly, leaning against the granite countertop of his gleaming modern kitchen, his wife, Jessica, likely within earshot, rolling her eyes. "Mum, we've talked about this. Those repairs are expensive. Are you sure you can't just patch it up again? Maybe Mr. Henderson from next door could take a look. He's 85, Mark. I don't think he should be climbing on any roofs," I replied softly. "I got a quote. It's a few $1,000s. The silence that followed was thick with judgment. It was Jessica who broke it. I could hear her voice, sharp and clear, in the background. "A few thousand? For that old shack? Tell her to sell the place, Mark. It's falling apart anyway." Then, a little closer to the phone, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Eleanor, honey, you just don't have that kind of money. We don't have that kind of money to just throw at a leaky roof." That was the lie that fueled their condescension. We don't have that kind of money. Mark was a senior manager at a successful marketing firm. Jessica hadn't worked a day since they married, preferring to fill her time with boutique shopping, spa days, and updating her social media with photos of their latest luxury vacation. They had money, they just didn't have any for me. "I'll figure something out," I said, my voice small. "I have some old things I can sell. Before I tell you what I did next, I have to ask for a quick favor. I've heard that YouTube has been unsubscribing people from channels automatically. Could you just take a second to check if you're still subscribed? It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference. Thank you." Now, back to the story. The old things were my last remaining pieces of jewelry from David. Not that Mark or Jessica knew their true value. To them, they were just gaudy relics from a bygone era. The following day, I took the diamond earrings, the ones David gave me for our 25th anniversary, and a simple gold necklace to a downtown jeweler, not the high-end one on the main street, but a smaller, discreet place I'd researched. The jeweler, a kind man with a magnifying glass permanently attached to his eye, examined the pieces. "These are exquisite, ma'am," he said, his voice hushed with reverence. "The clarity on these diamonds is exceptional. VVS one at least. And this necklace, 24-carat gold, vintage. Where did you get these?" "They were a gift from my husband," I said, a genuine lump forming in my throat. He named a price that was more than enough to replace every roof in the neighborhood. I accepted a fraction of it, in cash, just enough to cover the quote I'd received for the repair. I needed the paper trail to be believable. The rest was to be wired to a private account he helped me set up, an account that Mark and Jessica knew nothing about. I called Mark that evening to tell him the good news. "I managed it, dear. I sold some of Mom's old jewelry. I have enough to fix the roof." I heard Jessica's sharp, incredulous laugh in the background. It was a sound I had become all too familiar with. It was the sound of derision, of pity mixed with contempt. She sold that tacky junk. I'm shocked she got anything for it. She probably got ripped off. Mark's voice came back on the line, laced with a weary resignation that was somehow more hurtful than Jessica's outright cruelty. Well, that's good, Mom. I'm glad you found a solution. He didn't ask which pieces I'd sold. He didn't care. The roofer came the next week. As his team hammered away, securing new sturdy shingles over my head, I sat in my living room, sipping tea. The deception was physically and emotionally exhausting. Every day was a performance. I had to remember to act forgetful, to feign confusion over bills, to talk about clipping coupons and turning down the thermostat to save a few dollars. My friend Carol was the only one who knew the truth. She'd pop over once a week, bringing me groceries I didn't need, just to keep up appearances for the neighbors. I don't know how you do it, Elle, she said, sitting at my kitchen table, which I'd artfully distressed with a few scratches. Listening to them treat you like that. If it were my son, You'd have what, Carol? I asked with a sad smile. Yelled at him, cut him off. He would have just thought I was a bitter old woman. This is different. This isn't about anger, it's about clarity. David and I worked our entire lives building a business from nothing. We built it on trust, hard work, and integrity. He always believed that money doesn't change people, it just reveals who they truly are. I'm creating the dark. I want to see who my son is when no one is watching. Carol shook her head, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. And Jessica, my smile faded. Jessica is a different matter entirely. She's not being revealed. She's just confirming what I've known all along. The confirmation came sooner than I expected. A few days after the roof was fixed, Jessica posted new photos online. She was posing on the deck of a yacht, a glass of champagne in her hand, the sun setting over a turquoise sea. The caption read, "A much-needed spontaneous getaway to the Caribbean. You only live once. Blessed luxury life." Mark was in the photo beside her, his smile tight, uneasy. He knew I'd just sold my precious memories to fix a leak, while they were spending 10 times that amount on a whim. He knew, and he did nothing. I looked at the picture for a long time, the screen of the old tablet I'd bought from a thrift store glowing in the dim light of my living room. There was no anger, no shock, just a cold, profound sadness, the kind of sadness that crystallizes into purpose. The leaks in my house were fixed, but the cracks in my family were becoming chasms, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that the final storm was yet to come. The foundation of their world was about to be tested, and I was the one who had laid the dynamite. The months that followed were a masterclass in feigned decline. I allowed my garden to become overgrown with weeds, a stark contrast to the perfectly manicured lawns of my neighbors. I started forgetting appointments, forcing Mark to call and reschedule, his exasperation growing with each call. I would ask him for help with the simplest things, reading the fine print on a can of soup, programming the TV remote, all to reinforce the narrative of my encroaching helplessness. Their visits became less frequent, but more revealing. They would arrive with a sigh, their eyes scanning the room for new signs of decay. Jessica would subtly wipe her hand on her designer jeans after touching a doorknob. Mark would avoid eye contact, busying himself with some small meaningless task, like changing a light bulb, as if that single act of filial duty absolved him of his larger neglect. One afternoon, they stopped by unannounced. Jessica was holding a brochure. It was glossy, filled with pictures of smiling, white-haired seniors playing bingo and doing seated yoga. The Golden Meadows Senior Community, the title proclaimed. "Mom, we need to talk about the future," Mark began, his tone artificially gentle. Jessica jumped in, unable to contain her eagerness. "We were driving by this place, Eleanor, and it's just lovely. It's clean, it's safe, and you'd have people your own age to talk to. They have a nurse on staff 24/7. I looked from the brochure to their faces. Mark's was a mask of strained concern. Jessica's was alight with a predatory gleam. This was their endgame: move the old woman into a facility, sell the house, even in its dilapidated state, the land was valuable, and wash their hands of the burden. I'm happy here, I said, my voice quiet but firm. This is my home. David and I built this house, and it was wonderful, Mum. But it's too much for you now, Mark insisted. You're not safe here alone. What if you fall? What if you sold the house and used the money to live comfortably? Jessica added, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. You wouldn't have to worry about leaky roofs or anything. You could just relax, use the money to live comfortably. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. They had no idea that my comfort was secured in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. I looked at the brochure again. The people in the photos had vacant smiles. It looked less like a community and more like a waiting room for the end of life. I'll think about it, I lied, placing the brochure on the coffee table. It was a promise I had no intention of keeping. The incident that sealed their fate, the one that moved my timeline from eventually to now, happened 2 weeks later. It was my 80th birthday. I hadn't expected a party or a grand gesture. In fact, I'd told them not to make a fuss. A simple phone call would have been enough. The phone never rang. All day, I waited. The silence in the house was deafening. Carol called, of course, and sang happy birthday in her cheerful off-key voice. My niece, Sarah, my late sister's daughter, called from her small apartment in Chicago, where she was working 2 jobs to make ends meet as a single mother. Happy birthday, Aunt Eleanor, she said, her voice warm and genuine. I'm so sorry I can't be there. Liam has a bit of a cold. I put a card in the mail for you, though. Thank you, my dear. That's all that matters, I told her, my heart aching with a mix of love for her and disappointment in my own son. We spoke for 20 minutes about her son, her work, and her dreams of one day opening her own small bakery. She never once complained about money or asked for a thing. As evening fell, I accepted the truth. They had forgotten, or more likely, they had chosen not to remember. I was about to turn in for the night when a notification popped up on my tablet. Jessica had tagged Mark in a new post. The photo was of a large, laughing group of people at a fancy restaurant. Mark and Jessica were in the center, raising champagne glasses. Other couples surrounded them. The caption read, "Celebrating our bestie's huge promotion. So proud of you, Dan. To bigger and better things." The post was time-stamped 2 hours ago. They were out celebrating, living their glittering life, while my 80th birthday passed without a whisper of acknowledgement. I stared at the photo, my blood running cold. It wasn't just neglect anymore, it was a deliberate erasure. I was an inconvenience, a footnote in their lives that they were actively trying to delete. And that's when I saw it. The comment that broke through my carefully constructed composure, it was from one of Jessica's friends, a woman with an equally artificial smile. "Looks amazing. Where's Mark's mom? Thought it was her big 8 me's 0 today." Jessica's reply appeared moments later, a casual, dismissive sentence that she likely typed without a second thought. But for me it was a gunshot in the quiet room of my heart. LOL, she's probably fine. Honestly, she gets so confused with dates now, she likely doesn't even know. Better for her to just rest. You know how draining these things can be for the elderly. She likely doesn't even know. The tablet slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the floor. The screen didn't break, but something inside me did. The sadness, the disappointment, it all evaporated, replaced by an ice-cold, diamond-hard clarity. The test was over. The results were in. My son, the boy I had raised, had allowed his wife to publicly portray me as a senile, irrelevant old woman on my 80th birthday. The performance was done. The curtain was about to rise on the final act. Okay, a quick interruption. If you're enjoying this story and the drama, do me a favor and hit the like button. It tells the YouTube algorithm that you want to see more stories like this one. Now, let's get to the part you've been waiting for. I picked up the tablet, my hands were no longer shaking. I navigated to my contacts and found the number for Mr. Thompson, my lawyer and executor of David's estate. A man who, like Carol, knew the entire truth. He was a shrewd, old-school attorney who believed in justice, and he had been waiting for my signal for 5 years. He answered immediately, his voice crisp and professional, even at this late hour. "Eleanor, is it time?" I looked out the window at the dark, quiet street. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, a woman who looked frail and old, but whose eyes now held the glint of steel. "Yes, Arthur," I said, my voice clear and steady. "It's time. Send the letters. I want them in your office on Friday." The letter arrived at Mark and Jessica's sprawling new-build home on a Wednesday. It was delivered by a courier, requiring a signature, ensuring it wouldn't be mistaken for junk mail. It was printed on the thick, cream-colored letterhead of Thompson, Finch and Associates, a law firm whose name carried significant weight in the city. I can only imagine the scene. Jessica, likely in her silk pajamas, annoyed at the interruption to her morning coffee. Mark, already dressed in a suit that cost more than my monthly budget, probably thinking it was some legal trouble from his work. The letter was brief and formal, its language meticulously crafted by Arthur Thompson to be both uninformative and deeply unsettling. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Vance, this letter serves as a formal summons to a meeting at our offices at 10 a.m. this coming Friday, July 26th. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss a matter of significant financial importance pertaining to the estate and future arrangements of Mrs. Eleanor Vance. Your presence is mandatory. Please bring formal identification. Sincerely, Arthur Thompson, ESQ." The phone call came within minutes of them signing for it. Mark's voice was a tight coil of anxiety and irritation. "Mom, what is this? We got a letter from a lawyer, Thompson, Finch. Those guys are heavy hitters. What's going on? Are you in some kind of trouble? Did someone sue you?" I let the silence hang for a moment, enjoying the slight shift in the power dynamic. "No, dear, I'm not in trouble," I said calmly. Jessica's voice erupted in the background. "Is she selling the house? Is that it, Mark? Did she go behind our backs and sell it? Is that what the financial matter is?" "Jessica, calm down," Mark hissed, but the panic in his own voice was evident. He lowered his voice, speaking into the phone as if sharing a secret. "Mom, what did you do? You have to tell me. We're your family. We're your family." The words were so hollow they nearly echoed. "Arthur will explain everything on Friday," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. "Just be there, Mark. 10 o'clock. I hung up before he could reply. For the next 2 days I prepared, not by dressing up or planning a speech, but by steeling myself emotionally. I went through old photo albums, reminding myself of the man David was and the principles we stood for. I looked at pictures of Mark as a little boy, full of laughter and light, and mourned the man he had become. This wasn't an act of revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy emotion. This was an act of correction, a final balancing of the scales. On Thursday evening, Jessica called me directly. It was the first time she had initiated a call in over a year. Her voice was a syrupy, manipulative purr. "Eleanor, darling, Mark and I are just so worried about you. This whole lawyer thing, it's so stressful. Are you sure you're okay? You know you can tell us anything. We're just trying to look out for you." "I'm fine, Jessica," I said, my voice flat. "Is it about the house?" she pressed, unable to hide her agenda. "Because if you need help managing that, we can take care of everything. You wouldn't have to lift a finger." "I'll see you tomorrow, Jessica," I said, and ended the call. Friday morning dawned grey and overcast, the sky the color of slate. It was perfect. I dressed in my usual attire, a simple navy blue dress, a grey cardigan, and comfortable flat shoes. My only accessory was the simple gold wedding band David had placed on my finger 60 years ago. It was the one piece I would never sell. Carol drove me. She squeezed my hand as we pulled up to the imposing downtown building that housed Arthur's firm. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. "I've been ready for 5 years," I said. The offices of Thompson, Finch and Associates were the antithesis of my home. They were a world of polished mahogany, silent plush carpets, and hushed efficiency. The air smelled of old leather and money. Arthur greeted me himself at the door to the conference room, his handshake firm and reassuring. "He's ready for you, Eleanor," he said, his eyes twinkling. He had a flair for the dramatic, a quality I deeply appreciated. I walked into the conference room. Mark and Jessica were already seated at the long, polished table. They looked tense and out of place. Mark was nervously straightening his tie, while Jessica was surveying the expensive art on the walls with a covetous eye. When they saw me, their expressions shifted. Mark looked relieved, Jessica, annoyed. They had likely expected to meet with the lawyer alone. My presence complicated their narrative. "Mom," Mark said, standing up. "What is all this? You look pale. Are you okay?" "I'm perfectly fine, Mark. Please, sit," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. Arthur sat to my right, placing a thick, leather-bound folder in front of him. Jessica forced a brittle smile. "Well, this is all very dramatic, Arthur," she said, addressing the lawyer directly. "I hope we can get this over with quickly. I have a luncheon at 1. Arthur fixed her with a look that could have frozen water. "I assure you, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice cold and precise, "by the end of this meeting, your luncheon will be the last thing on your mind." He opened the folder. The room fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the city traffic 10 floors below. "We are gathered here today," Arthur began, his voice resonating through the room, "to execute a specific provision within the last will and testament of David Vance and the associated Eleanor Vance Living Trust." Jessica's eyes lit up. "Will trust, money." I could see the calculations flashing behind her eyes. Mark just looked confused. "Dad's will?" Mark asked. "But that was all settled years ago. Everything went to Mom." "Not everything," Arthur said, pausing for effect. He pulled out a single sheet of paper from the folder. "David was a very wise man. He understood human nature, and he insisted on the inclusion of a particular clause in his final directives, a clause I advised against at the time, for its theatricality. He called it the character clauses." He cleared his throat and began to read from the page. "My fortune was built on integrity, hard work, and the unwavering belief that family is not just a bond of blood, but a covenant of love, respect, and mutual support. Therefore I direct that my estate, upon my wife Eleanor's passing or at her sole discretion while living, shall pass to my descendants. However, this inheritance is conditional." Arthur paused and looked directly at Mark and Jessica. Their smiles were gone, replaced by looks of tense anticipation. The storm had arrived, the rain was about to fall.